Hello and welcome to this Java interview coding challenge video where we don't just solve coding problems, we learn how to tackle them in an actual interview setting. You learn how to solve the problem and what to discuss about the problem in an interview to maximize your chances of success. In this video, we're going to be tackling the LeetCode problem called detect capital, right? This is LeetCode number 520. So here's what the problem states. Given a word, you need to judge whether the usage of capital letters in that word is right or not. Okay, this begs the question, what is right? What is the usage of capital letters that's right? Well, so there are three conditions here. Here's the right usage. Either the word should contain all letters capitals. Okay, everything is capital in this word. Then you can say the usage is right. Or all the letters are lowercase in that word. Even in that case, you can say the usage is right. And then the third case is only the first letter of that word is capital, rest are all lowercase. In that case also, you can say the usage is right. Okay, so these are the three conditions. Given a word, you need to check if any of these three conditions meet. In that case, you're going to return true. And if any of these conditions do not meet, then in that case, the usage of capitals in that word is not correct as per this problem, so you have to return false. Okay, so this is the problem statement, and if an interviewer is asking you this is what they would leave you with. So when you hear this in an interview, the first set of things you're going to have to think about is like, okay, let's identify some words which meet this criteria and some words which do not meet this criteria, right? So let's look at some words which actually meet this criteria. We have three conditions here, so let's identify those words. So here are some right usages. So all caps. This is an example of a word that is all caps, so the usage of capitals is correct. All right. Here is a word which is all lowercase, so even this one should say the usage is correct, right? And here is a word where the first letter is capitals and the rest are lowercase, right? So this combination is also correct. So here are three use cases where your function, whatever you're writing, it should return, yep, this is all good. Okay, so if this is not met, so for example, I have like a mixed case or something like that, then that should return false. Okay, so this is the expectation for your program. All right, so before we look at the approach, there are some things which you're going to have to clarify, and this again goes back to what you would typically ask in an interview setting. Any coding challenge, you would have to ask this. The first thing is you look at the boundary condition. All right, what if you're given an empty string, right? The word without any characters. What should the expectation be? Does it meet the criteria? Like, is it yes or no? That's a good question to ask the interviewer. Let's say the interviewer says, yeah, you can return true. There is an obvious implication about what happens when there is a one-letter word that's given. Okay, one letter is either going to be lowercase or uppercase. Well, in that case, what is the expectation? Well, the interviewer can say, well, that's also valid. Return true. There are other conditions you're going to have to think about, like what if the word contains like special characters which are neither uppercase nor lowercase, right? This can apply to the one character word as well. So here again, the interviewer can take multiple different options. Let's say the interviewer says, don't worry about it, right? You know that what you're going to get is just alphabets, right? So let's set the stage there. If the interviewer says something else, there could be special characters, then you're gonna have to accommodate that in your code, right? You're gonna have to write code which does that check. Just asking this question and knowing that you're covering all your bases, you're making sure you're that detail-oriented person, it's gonna benefit you in an interview. So okay, let's ask those questions, get it out of the way, and you're gonna start with the approach, right? You're gonna solve this problem. How are you gonna solve this problem? The basic approach that I can think of is like just do a check like you would do a check, right? So let's say you're checking this. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to look at the first letter. Is it uppercase? Well, okay. Then is the second letter uppercase? Well, if both of them are uppercase, that means that you're going to have to check all of them to be uppercase, right? Because you're looking at the all uppercase scenario, all right? So let me actually demonstrate what I mean by that. So if I were to look at the possible words, the possible conditions. Let's say I have all uppercase word. Okay, so this is all uppercase. Now this is valid. Okay, now we have first letter uppercase and the rest lowercase. This is valid as well. All right, and then you have the everything lowercase. This is valid as well. Okay, so now what you need to do is you can basically have a bunch of if conditions which does these checks. Okay, so first check the first letter, see if it is uppercase. Well, then from here on, everything needs to be either all uppercase or all lowercase. All right, and then you check the first letter. If it's lowercase, well, then from here on, everything needs to be lowercase. Right? It's a simple way to check this. You basically stick a bunch of if conditions, right? But there are a couple of ways in which you can make this a little more elegant. All right. So before I get into all those different ways in which you can tackle this, I want to point out one solution that I found online. It's kind of like a clever way of solving the problem. Let's look at that, and then we will see what are the disadvantages of using that approach. It's clever, but it's a little bit of a disadvantage. So if you don't want to do this, if you don't want to do this kind of if condition, well, there is a shortcut way to find out if these conditions meet. All right, so here's the shortcut way. First, count all the number of uppercase letters in that word. Okay, you want to get all of the uppercase letters in the word. Now, the number of uppercase letters could be anywhere from 0 to the length of the word, right? Let's say you're given a 20-letter word. Now, the number of uppercase letters in that word can be 0, could be 20, which means they're all uppercase, or it could be anything in between, all right? So if you know that the number of uppercase letters in that word is 0, what does it mean? It means that it's an all lowercase word. In that case, you just return 0. You just return true, right? This is all lowercase, your condition is valid. Or if the number of uppercase letters you get is equal to the length of the string, which means it's all uppercase, well, even then you return true. Okay, so this is what you do. Count the number of uppercase letters. If it's either 0 or if it's equal to the length of the string, just return true. All right, fine. Now this leaves the third condition, which is the first letter is uppercase and the rest of them are lowercase. Now how do you check that? Well, that's simple as well. Now it's not 0 at this point, and it's not equal to the length of the string. It's somewhere in between. What does it actually need to be for the third condition to be met? It has to be 1, right? Only the first letter has to be uppercase. So if the first letter is uppercase, then the count is 1. So if the count is not 1, again, here you can return false, right? It's not 0, it's not the length, it's not 1, it's somewhere in between. That means there are more than 1 uppercase letters. That's not valid. You just return false. But if it is 1, then you just check the first letter. If that is the uppercase one, is that the one that you got, right? You just check the first letter. That's the first letter is uppercase, and you know that there is only 1 uppercase. That means obviously that the rest of the letters are lowercase, right? So in that case, you return true. And if for all the other conditions, you return false. All right. This is a clever solution. You're not dealing with the if conditions. You're like, okay, if this is the case, then I need to scan for this. If this is the case, I need to scan for that. It's easy, right? You just do one pass, count the number of uppercase letters, and then you just make a decision based on the result that you get, right? It's easy and it's simple to understand. So here's what the code would look like for this. If you were to implement this, this is what the code would look like. So first of all, I have a detect capital use is the method which takes in a word as an argument, and then it returns a boolean, right? You're basically having a method which passes judgment. It says thumbs up or a thumbs down for your word, right? So it returns a boolean. Now, what does this method do? First, it initializes a variable called number of capitals is 0, right? Because you need to measure the number of capital letters in this word. So what you do is, you do just that. Int I equals 0, I less than word dot length, I plus plus. I am basically going to check each letter. I'm going to do word.char at of I. So I'm going to get each letter one by one inside this loop. And I'm going to check if that letter that I got is uppercase. If that's uppercase, what do I need to do? I need to increment this guy. All right. So I'm going to do that. Number of capitals plus plus. Now I finish this whole thing. So what do I need to do? I need to check if number of capitals at the end of this loop is it equal to 0, or if it's equal to word.length, Well, then I know that in this particular case, if it's equal to word.length, that means that the word is all caps. If it's equal to 0, that means that the word is all lowercase. So I'm going to return true. Those are those two cases, right? This leaves the final case, which is the first letter capital and the rest of them are small. Then I need to return true. How do I detect that? I just do this. If the number of capitals equals 1 and character dot is uppercase of word.caret of 0. So this is the first letter. I'm going to check if its number of capitals is 1 and the first letter is uppercase, then I return true. Otherwise, this condition is going to be false. So my method is going to return false. Okay. Simple method, right? Simple approach, makes sense. It's easy and it's, it works, right? It gives you the answer that you need. But there is a disadvantage to using this approach, all right? Before we talk about the disadvantage, let's look at the time complexity of this thing. What's the big O notation of this approach? Well, the big O is O of n. Okay, here n is the size of the word. What does O of n mean? O of n basically means that your algorithm is dependent on the size of the input. Here, the size of the input is the length of the word, right? So you basically are looping through this whole word, calculating all the capitals. You're going to have to do one pass of the word, and then you're going to find out all the capital letters. So the time complexity is O of n, right? Doing the decision based on the number of capital letters, that's constant time. You don't even have to think about that, right? This is O of n is the algorithm. So can we do better? If you answer this in an interview, the interviewer is very likely going to come back to, well, can you improve this algorithm? Can you make it run a little faster, right? So what's the drawback with this approach? It's good, it's easy to understand, but there is a certain drawback. What's the drawback? Well, the drawback is we are not quitting as soon as we can, okay? Take, for example, I have a word which looks like this. Okay, so I have a capital letter and a small letter and another capital letter. Okay, by the time I hit the third character, I know that this thing doesn't meet my requirements, right? This is gone. When the first letter is capital and the second is small, then all of the other letters in that word has to be small. Otherwise, you're going to return false anyway, right? So at this point, when you detect the third letter, you know it's not going to work. There's really no point in having to scan the rest of the word. But does our smart algorithm take care of this? No. It's going to calculate all the capitals anyway, right? So if you have a long word and you have some combination like this where you can quit early, you're not quitting early, okay? So here's the question. Can you quit at the first wrong, quote unquote, wrong character that you encounter? Well, you can, but then we're going to deal with the if condition mess, right? We're going to have to say, okay, if this is the case, then do this. If this is the case, then do that. Well, turns out the LeetCode recommended solution actually does something like this, all right? So here's the recommended way, and here's how they come to this, right? So let me explain to you what the logic is. It's not a lot of if conditions. You kind of reduce it to just one, okay? So here's how this goes. Let's repeat the use cases that we've seen so far. So we have all capitals, okay? Everything is capital in the word. This is valid. Or you have all smalls, okay? Everything in this word is small, which is also valid. And then you have the first letter capital and the rest are small. This is also valid. So in theory, this looks like you're validating 3 use cases, right? You have to have if conditions to check for all these 3 things. But if you think about it, it's actually just 2 use cases, right? Think about these 2 use cases here. These 2. What's common about this? The thing that's common about both these use cases is that it really doesn't matter what the first letter is. What you're doing is you are looking from the second letter onwards to see if all of the remaining letters are lowercase, right? So you don't even need to check the first letter, okay? If you're just validating these 2 use cases, then what do you need to do? Your application needs to just check from the second letter on to see if all of them are lowercase, okay? So this is actually condition number 1, okay? Condition number 1 is when the second letter onwards, the whole word is lowercase, all right? And then this is the only other additional condition, which is condition number 2, which is to see all of them, if the first letter and the second letter are uppercase, well then the check that you need to do is that all of them are uppercase, right? So you're basically looking at 2 conditions, not 3. So this is what this code does, all right? This is what's the LeetCode supplied result, the solution, right? The LeetCode supplied solution. So here's what it's doing. Here's the first case, which is the all capital case, all right? So if word.caret of 0, which is the first letter, is uppercase, and word.caret of 1, which is the second letter, is uppercase, well, then what do you need to do? You need to make sure that the whole word is uppercase. So I'm going to loop from I equals 2 to less than n. So anytime I encounter lowercase, I'm going to say false, right? Because I need to make sure the rest of the stuff is all uppercase, which is what the first case is. Or the second case, of course, the first case is what this is talking about, right? This is number 2 that I've added over here. This is what it's looking at, okay? Now, this one, case 2 and 3, is basically the scenario of the second character onwards being everything being lowercase, okay? So I'm going to look at I equals 1 to I less than n. Now I need to make sure the whole thing is lowercase, okay? Which is what these 2 are, right? The whole thing is lowercase. So I'm going to see if any one of them is uppercase, I'm going to return false right away, okay? And then here there needs to be a return true. So if it doesn't return so far, then here at the end, it should just return true, okay? So this is the thing that I found from the LeetCode page itself. But I feel like we can still do better, okay? Before we talk about that, so what is the time complexity of this thing? This is still O of n, right? You're gonna have to loop through all of them, all the letters, but it's gonna be one of these 2 loops, right? It's either gonna be the first loop or the second loop. You have that in an if block. So one of those loops are gonna run, and the advantage of this over the previous one is you can quit early. You can quit at the first wrong character you encounter. You're gonna say, yes, I'm quitting. This is not valid. You save some time there. It's some optimization that you can perform, but it's still O of n because of the way we calculate big O. Okay, so there is one improvement we can do for this thing so that it doesn't look this bad. I'm not a big fan of doing this because you're basically having a loop which does the same thing, kind of, but with different conditions, okay? So if this condition is met, what am I doing? I'm checking for character is lowercase in order to exit. If this condition is met, then what am I doing? I'm checking character is uppercase as the condition, which causes me to exit. Okay, so what is the common between these 2 things? I'm looping through the whole string, right? I'm checking for a condition every time. And when that condition is met or not met, whichever it may be, I'm going to return false, right? That's the common pattern. Now I essentially have duplicated that code because the condition is different. What if I were to kind of take that condition out? How can I do that? What if I have that condition be a variable? You might wonder, well, how can I have a condition as a variable? Well, it turns out in Java, you very well can with lambdas, okay? Lambda is a way in which you can hold on to this kind of a check, right? Some logic, you can hold on to it in a variable, and then inside the loop, you don't have to say if this, then that. You just set the variable just once and then run that variable, that lambda thing inside the loop. It results in a much more elegant code. It's not going to result in any performance improvement, but it results in much more elegant code. So here's what it looks like. So first of all, the insight is that the first 2 characters affect what the check should be. So I'm going to have a condition for identifying what the check is based on the first 2 characters, and then we're going to use a little bit of lambdas to make our job simple. Okay, so here's the solution. What we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to do the boundary check. Okay, if word.length is less than or equal to 1, I'm going to return true. Right? Because we know we've asked the interviewer, that the interviewer is told, okay, this is the boundary check. Just put that thing in there, right? This is the first thing you do. And then after this, now I'm going to hold on to a predicate. Okay, a predicate in Java is basically a lambda which takes in something and then returns a boolean, true or a false. Okay, it basically judges your value. It's going to say yay or nay. Okay, that's what a predicate does. It returns true or false. It returns thumbs up or thumbs down. So you can pass to a predicate anything you want, and then the predicate is going to pass judgment on it and it's going to return a boolean. Okay, so a predicate of character is basically a predicate which takes in a character value and then it returns a boolean, true or false. Okay, so I'm going to have a predicate called correct case, which is going to be initialized with a value of lowercase. Okay, so what correct case does is it takes a character and then it returns true or false. Well, in this case, it returns true if that character is lowercase, and it returns false if that character is not lowercase. Okay, that's what I've done over here, right? This is an expression which I'm using for assigning to this thing. It's basically a lambda which runs character dot is lowercase for any input character, and then it returns a boolean. Okay, fine. Now, if we were to just look at the condition of like everything lowercase, right? It doesn't matter what the first condition is. Imagine if you're just looking at that. Now, what do you have to do? Now, I'm going to loop through the word, and I'm testing against this correct case now. Rather than have the condition be embedded, hard-coded in my code, I am using a lambda to test the word.caret of I, okay, which is basically similar to what we did earlier. In this case, we were doing is lowercase. Well, now I am kind of doing is lowercase, because you see here, I'm assigning lowercase as the lambda to correct case, and I'm doing correct case dot test. This is how you run predicates, by the way. You run predicates by doing the predicate dot test method. You pass in what you want it to test, and then it's going to again return the yay or nay, okay? So now I'm checking if correct case dot test of this, then if not this, then I'm going to return false, right? I want it to be lowercase, right? The correct case is lowercase. So I'm going to scan from the second letter onwards, which is where I is 1. And if any of them doesn't meet really, then the minute I find an uppercase letter, I'm going to return false. Okay, so this is going to accommodate these two use cases, right? First letter is capitals, rest are lower, or the first letter is lower and the rest are lower as well. Okay, so I'm going to scan from here on, and I'm checking if correct case of each of these letters, right here, this is lowercase. I'm checking if each of these is lower. Well, then I'm going to continue. If any of them is not lower, well, then I exit. Okay, which is what I'm doing here. If not correct case, then I return false. Okay, so that takes care of those two. But now this leaves this case where you have all capitals. Okay, now in this case, this will not work. I cannot check for this. This is a special case where if the first two are caps, then the check that I need to do from here on is upper, not lower. Okay, so for that, what do? I basically add that check over here. So what I do is, if the first character is uppercase and the second character is uppercase, now the correct case is not lowercase anymore. It happens to be uppercase. Okay, so I'm going to check that. If not this, then it's going to go ahead with the check as before. But if the first two characters are uppercase, well, then the correct case that I need to be checking for is uppercase. And again, the same logic holds good. If not correct case dot test of the word dot caret, I'm going to return false. So essentially what I've done is, rather than have repetition of this loop, have this loop twice and inside an if condition, I have extracted that out and put that as an assignment of a predicate. All right, so the predicate is going to decide what the check should be, and that is influenced by the if condition. The loop is essentially outside the if condition, and I don't have to repeat this twice in the code. It just is there once. All right, the benefit of this, of course, is that it makes your code a little more elegant, and if you have to change it later, you don't have to change two places. You just change this one place, because the loop is in just one location, and it makes it easy to maintain as well. If you use this kind of a reasoning and you mention this code in your interview, you're going to nail the interview, right? Because this is something that you would have to do in an actual job situation. You're writing code for a company. You need to make sure that your code not just works, but it's also elegant, it's also maintainable, and you're not writing code which has likely to introduce bugs, in the process, in the age of the code, right? You're making it more bug-free, more likely to be bug-free, because you removed duplicates. Okay, so again, let's look at the time complexity. What are we looking at? It's the law of n. Okay, it hasn't changed, but then we are making it a little more optimal because we are exiting early, like we discussed earlier. But then we're also making it more optimal for maintainability and readability, which is a big plus. So this is the LeetCode problem, detect capital. I hope you found it helpful. Please check out the playlist for other LeetCode and HackerRank problems in an interview setting. Thanks for watching.